Hufsa. It's funny because I saw the therapy dog here, and someone said to me, "Oh, the dog is going to win the award," and I was like, "Oh, I hope I don't have to follow the dog." But it looks like I did. But it's okay. It's cute puppy, cute. Alrighty, so I guess I'll just start by thanking MHA very much for having me here. It's a huge honor because I won the award 2 years ago, and a lot has happened since then. Thank you everyone for taking pictures. Please send them to me, I'll give you my phone number. Or Instagram, so yeah. So I really appreciate that. And a lot has happened since then. I really want to highlight that most of all, but I do want to start with my story from the very beginning, since I love telling my story and I think it's very valuable. So I'm going to start from the very, very beginning, as I'm a Pakistani Muslim woman. My parents are immigrants and came to this country before I was born. And I lived in a small Long Beach apartment where it was a tiny apartment, just me, my brother, and my parents. But my mom has 7 brothers and sisters, and one by one they would come to the U.S., stay in our tiny apartment, get jobs, and then move out. And now 30 years later, everyone has families and homes of their own. Because I was taught from a very young age, it doesn't matter how hard it is. 1, you keep going, and 2, you keep supporting each other no matter what. Now, growing up, I was very inquisitive. I loved learning. I started reading when I was 2, using computers when I was 3. And in 2nd grade, my teacher called my mom to tell her that I could type faster than she could. And this all went to my head because when I introduced myself, I would say, "Hi, I'm Hufsa and I'm gifted."
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope I'm more humble now. So overall, I call that the era of happy, healthy, and adorable Hufsa. Unfortunately, when I was 10, I moved to a new school, and I was bullied very hard, and I became very depressed. When I was 10, I found a slam book where I was voted dumbest and ugliest girl in school. And I went home crying, and I thought, I want to die. And at the age of 10, I attempted suicide. Now, that wasn't the first time it happened again, which I will get to. Now, thankfully, when I moved to middle school, I got to start over and I came out of my shell again. In fact, I was voted both teacher's pet and class clown. Someone asked me, "How did you pull that off?" And I said, I'm gifted. Still working on the humility, I guess. But then high school came, and I became really depressed. And that's whenever this up and down that's been happening in my life became apparent. Now, my teachers, my friends, and my mom all noticed that there was something wrong, but no one did anything because they didn't know what to do. That lack of education about mental health meant that I didn't get the treatment that I needed at the time. But thankfully, I still excelled academically, and I moved on to Harvey Mudd College, which is an engineering college in Claremont, California, which is where I found my people. I just love the school. I love the learning environment. Everything was great, but I started to become really symptomatic as well. And I started to have psychotic episodes, started to get really delusional. I had this delusion that I didn't have any friends. And literally, I would cry about it for hours. My friends would surround me saying, "No, we're your friends, we're your friends." But the delusion was so pervasive, I just couldn't see past it. I also turned to alcohol to help me cope with my symptoms, and my friends would stage interventions, and I would go off on it and off and on and off. There was one night where I was crying, and I just snapped. I just started screaming, "I don't want him to find me! I don't want him to find me!" I don't know who that was, but I kept screaming it. And I ran out of my dorm onto the other Claremont colleges, crying, very delusional, very paranoid. I remember that it was freezing that night, and I only had a blouse and a skirt on. And I remember touching my skin and feeling that it was cold, but I couldn't feel the cold within me. And Eventually, the counselor came in the middle of the night to come talk to me, and that's whenever I started to get the help I needed. But I say myself that I am a stigma smasher. I combat the stigma of mental illness, but I had so much stigma back then. I said, I'm not crazy. I'm not mentally ill. I'm not going to take medication. But things got worse. One night, I was on the third floor balcony of a dorm when I heard something say to me, "Hufsa," climbed from one balcony to the other. And I remember crying because I didn't want to, but I was sitting on the ledge with one leg over when my friend came out and stopped me. All this was just terrifying, and I watched my life fall apart. And again, at the end of my freshman year, I attempted suicide. Now, the next day, I remember I had to go talk to the resident advisor, Jason. And I never felt so ashamed in my entire life. But he looked me in the eye and he said, "Hufsa, you are destined for greatness." In my absolute lowest moment, he believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, which is such an important point that we need to do. As mental health professionals, as friends, as family members of people with mental illness, we need to believe in people when they don't believe in themselves. Now, I did take a leave of absence, got on medication and therapy, picked up my beautiful bass guitar, and overall, I started to get better. But the rest of college, coming back, was really difficult. It was that up and down, medication changes, symptomatic, falling behind in class. But thankfully, due to disability services and very accommodating professors, I was able to graduate from Harvey Mudd College. Thank you. Yeah, unfortunately, the story gets sad again. Sorry about that. Yeah, after college, I was very, very depressed. I got fired from 3 jobs in 1 year. And I became so hopeless, and I had so much self-hatred. I would tell myself, "Hufsa, you're stupid, you're crazy, you're never gonna get better." And I would feel this self-hatred manifest in these tactile hallucinations where I would feel things damage my body, even though there was nothing there. And overall, I was in so much mental, emotional, and physical pain that every day I would get down on my knees and I would beg to God, "Please just kill me now. I can't do it on my own." Then I found NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Hi, Steve. An organization that believed in me when I did not believe in myself. And I started volunteering with them, and I took this class called Peer-to-Peer, which is a recovery education course that is just for people with mental illness. And in that class, I got to meet other people with mental illness who were doing well. I learned that mental illness is not the end all. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's chemical. It's not personal. And I started to feel a lot better as people welcomed me with so much empathy that by the end of that class, I stopped feeling suicidal and I started to share my story. Now, in college, I kept the mental illness as quiet as possible. And I remember one time where I did talk about it, and I was sitting on the floor, hugging my legs, crying as I expressed to my friend that I had something called mental illness, and tried to explain that to her, and I couldn't do it. But this time I came from a source of strength, where I said to my friends, I have mental illness, I want you to hear my story, and I want you to know it's not the end. And that made such a difference coming from a place of strength that people understood. So I started telling more people. And then I became a mentor for that peer-to-peer class. And I started telling more people about my story. And it was such a miraculous feeling that I realized that I found my calling. that I need to share my story. I need to be a mental health advocate. I need to work in the field so I can make a difference. Now, 3 years ago, I was actually awarded an award from NAMI called the Next Step Award for my advocacy efforts. And that was the peak of my career. I made it. I had done so much. And then something happened. 1 week later, I was psychiatrically hospitalized for the first time in my life. What? How did that happen? When I was doing so well, how could something like that happen? And that's what I want to highlight right now, is the nature of recovery and mental illness, is that sometimes we fall, and in my case, I did fall. And I fell hard, and I entered that unit. And no one knew me in that unit. They didn't know anything about my accomplishments. They didn't know I went to college. They didn't know anything about me. And there were times where it was really hard because the providers in that unit varied. I had really great providers that cared a lot more there, and I had providers that were burnt out, who didn't care, who didn't look at me like I had potential. And then one stood out to me. He was a social worker named John. He came to do the assessment in my room, and I asked him, "Are you a social worker?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Where did you get your MSW?" He said, "Cal State Fullerton." I said, "Believe it or not, I'm supposed to start my MSW this fall at Cal State Long Beach, but it looks like I'm not capable of doing it." And then he said to me, "The best of us are the ones that have been through it." He didn't know me. He didn't have to say that, but he believed in me anyway. Now I'm pretty close to completing my MSW. I've got like a year left, crossing all my fingers right now. So in a year, if you have any job openings, I'm just kidding. Not kidding. Now, one thing I want to say that some of you might not believe is that I am no different than the clients that we serve, except that I have the privilege of quality mental health treatment, of having insurance. I had the same therapist for 7 years to get me through college, to get me through suicidality, to get me through the relapses, the struggles with transitions, starting a new job, having difficulties. She helped me get through it. Our clients may not be able to have that, but they have us. They have us, meaning that we can believe in them when they don't believe in themselves. And yes, sometimes it is difficult. We look at someone and we think deep down, like, how are they going to get better? I can't see the answers. But one thing I want to highlight is that I've worked in this field for 7 years. I've met hundreds of people with mental illness, and I can say to you right now, the person you see right now is not the person you will see in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years. That progress does happen, that we plant the seeds, and we need to put as much hope as possible in the person. We need to be like Jason, telling me you are destined for greatness. So maybe not so cheesy. Take your own words, that sort of thing. You know, saying to me, the best of us are the ones who have been through it. We need to do that for people, because people did that for me, and that's why I'm here. That's why 1 year after getting out of the psych unit, I was awarded this award, the MHA Hope and Courage Award. Started my MSW program, raised $25,000 for NAMI, on the board for the Dale McIntosh Center for the Disabled, and I'm becoming a comedian too, so. Don't tell my mom, she's not happy about that. So, I realize I don't have a conclusion for this. But thank you, MHA, and thank you, everyone. Yeah.